Welcome to the scurrychurchofchrist.org. The Bible says in Hosea chapter 4 and verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Please don't let this happen to you. Feel free to contact us at scurrychurchofchrist.org, where you can visit us, and any Bible question that you may have, we will do our best to answer. We are so glad you decided to visit us.
Luke 14 and verse 16, starting out, it says, Then he said unto him, this is Jesus talking, Then he said unto him, a certain man made a great supper, and bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that they were bidden, Come, for all things are now ready. And they all with one consent began to make excuse. The first said unto him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must need to go and see it. I pray that you have me excused. And the other said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee have me excused. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So that servant came and showed his Lord these things. Then his master of the house, being angry, said unto his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor, and the maimed, and the halt, and the blind. Stop there.
Thank you, Kyle. I'd like you to turn to the book of Zephaniah. We've been studying that on Sunday evenings. I want you to notice something from the book of Zephaniah, the minor prophet. He was a prophet who prophesied during the time of Josiah. And of course, we know that Josiah was a great king. Zephaniah is speaking, of course, the word of God. He is sent by God to speak to the children of Israel, those who were Judah. Let's turn there quickly, and I want you to look at something that's very interesting about this book. And I want you to see that, look at verse 12 of the book of Zephaniah. Of course, you see in verse 1 of chapter 1 that Josiah is the king. In 2 Chronicles chapters 34 and 35, he reformed Israel. He reformed Jerusalem. But obviously everyone was not converted. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. And as a result, Zephaniah makes it very clear, because of their crimes against God, they will be punished. Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 4, chapter 1 and verse 7, verse 15, and you see it in 2 Chronicles chapter 34, 24, and 25. I want you to notice something here. I'm going to read this in verse 12. And it will come about at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit, who say that in their hearts the Lord will not do good or evil. I'm going to take this from the King James Version. The King James Version says, are settled on their lees. And so watch this in verse 12 again. It will come about at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and will punish the men who are settled on their lees. Now watch. And so what is that? He's going to punish them because they're settled on their lees. Now, a lee, watch this. Now, I want to read this, and I did a little minor research on lees, and just stay with me. And it's sediment, residue remains from the wine. So we're talking about a winemaker. So Lees are dead yeast cells and other particles remaining in wine after fermentation. They sediment like a creamy mud at the bottom of a fermenting container. Watch this. In wines, the leaves are mixed with dead yeast, grape skins, seed stems, which is racked on and discarded. Some winemakers choose to leave them in for different lengths of time in effort to, now watch this. I want you to hear this. Some winemakers choose to leave them in for different lengths of time in effort to enhance the complexity of the wine. See, aging lees can also enhance certain aromas or bring more body and texture to wines. The longer it remains on the lees, the richer and stronger it is. Wow. Image of wine which has been allowed to settle in its barrel without having been drawn off or emptied from vessel to vessel. That's racking. And so racking is when you want to get rid of the lees, and so you take the wine barrel or whatever it's in, and you go back and forth, put in another wine barrel, and you put in another wine barrel, you're going back and forth. That's racking. So here we see that God said they settle on the lees. And so they want this great tasting wine. See, they're not involved in racking. They settle on the lees, and so their focus is on worldly things. Settle on it. Let's get the best tasting wine. Leave it there. So they're not focusing on godly things. See, their mind is focused on worldly things. Now, I want you to turn to Jeremiah chapter 48. Jeremiah explains that very well as he deals with the nation of the Moabites. Jeremiah chapter 48. And watch how Jeremiah deals with this. We're going to work from this chapter. Watch what Jeremiah says, the prophet who was in Jerusalem during this time. And so the Moabites were a Gentile nation. But notice what he says in verse 11 before I go on and look at the other verses. He said, Moab has been at ease since his youth and has also been undisturbed on his lees. Watch. So remember, the lees is residue that's remained that goes to the bottom of the barrel. And so remember, it's supposed to make the wine taste better, make it stronger. And so God is going to punish the Moabites for their actions and for their unconcerned. They're not concerned about him. It's like they were indifferent. And indifference is have no particular interest or concern. I'm unconcerned, not caring. And so they're not caring about godly things. And so God recognizes that. Now, you notice in Zephaniah, he's talking to the Gentile, or rather the Jewish nation. In the book of Jeremiah, in chapter 48, he's talking to a Gentile nation. See, they were all amenable to the law of God during that time. So he says he has been undisturbed. Notice that. On his lees. And so remember, when they settled on the lees, now I like this version that I saw. It's called a Good News Translation. I like this particular, how they put it. They put it right. The Lord said, Moab has always lived secured and has never been taken into exile. Moab is like wine left to settle undisturbed, and never poured from jar to jar. Its flavor has never been ruined. And its taste is as good as ever. See that? That's Moab. And so they have never, like this, the leaves, they have never been disturbed. See, to not set on the leaves, to deal with those leaves, you have to disturb it, take it out of this container and put it in another container and go back and forth and say, take it out of this wine barrel and put another wine barrel. And so you're disturbing it. But he said Moab is like they have never been disturbed. So in other words, they're doing well. So God is going to disturb them. So watch this in verse 1 of chapter 48. Now, I want you to see he's talking to the Moabites. Now concerning Moab, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, woe to Nebo, for it has been destroyed. See, why, God? Now notice what the settle on the leaves. It represents you're indifferent and you're unconcerned about godly things. Now watch this. You're indifferent towards godly things, but you're not indifferent towards your things. That's what towards other things. That's what Kyle just read in chapter 14. I'm going to go there and read it again because I want you to get it. Thank you, Kyle. And so I want you to understand in this indifference here, you're indifferent, but it's concerning godly things. But you're not indifferent concerning your things. You notice in chapter 14, and see, it's like in verse 16, notice, but he said a certain man was given a big dinner and he invited them, see? And at the dinner hour, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready. This is God. Invitation to salvation. But they all alike, began to make excuses. See, there's an indifference there. And so you make an excuse. The first one said, I have bought a piece of land and I need to go out and look at it. Please consider me excused. See, they're making excuses, but I want you to see they're concerned about what they have to do and not the godly things. There's something else needs to be done. And so they're not concerned about godly things what God is inviting them to salvation and to learn his ways, but they're not concerned about that. They're too busy with other things. That's investments. I'm too busy investing. I'm too busy doing this. I'm too busy buying in real estate. I don't have time. And another one said, I have bought a fine yoke of oxen and I am going to try them out. Please consider me excused. This is my oxen, so I have to do this. And I'm going to try them out, see if they work very well in the field. See, they're not indifferent towards their things. They're indifferent towards the godly things. Another said, I have married a wife, and for that reason, I can't come. I'm busy. There are excuses, but I want you to see that when people are indifferent concerning godly things, the reason why they're indifferent concerning godly things because they're not indifferent concerning their things. And let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 48. Now watch this. So they were settled on the leaves. Now, but notice their attitude. Notice what God says. He's going to punish them. In verse 7 of chapter 48, he says, watch this, for because of your trust in your achievements, see that? For because of your trust in your achievements and treasures, even you yourself will be captured. And notice, and he says, and Chemosh will go off into exile. And so that was their false god, together with his priests and his princesses. And a destroyer will come to every city so that no city will escape. You're not going to escape. But notice what the Bible says here, because of your trust in your own achievements and treasures. They trusted in their own achievements and treasures. See that? They were not concerned about godly things. It's like the leaves undisturbed. My things are not disturbed, and my achievements are getting better, and my treasures are getting better. You see, so it's like I'm settled on the leaves, undisturbed, and it's getting better, and it's getting better, and it's getting better. And my achievements are growing. I'm doing a great job, and so I'm not concerned about godly things. You see. And notice their God, their Chemosh, and that was their false god. And God is going to notice the priests, and these are religious, the religious people who follow false religious things. And he said, and destroyer will come to every city so that no city will escape. And it's interesting in the book of Zephaniah, you see that again, that God said, in Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 12, notice that he says, watch this. He says, and it will come about at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit. And so in other words, and he's saying that no one will escape my judgment. I'm going to find you. You can't hide. You can't run. But I want you to see here that the whole world is amenable to God. Now, in the book of Zephaniah, he's talking to the Jews who settle on the leaves, indifferent, can care less about godly things. They were doing well in other areas. And so when the prophets spoke, when Josiah made some changes, they would settle on the leaves. See, leave me alone. I need to focus on my things, and I'm going to settle on let the leaves stay where they are, undisturbed, so the wine can be better and better. I can get the best that I want to have. And so leave me alone. And so you see here in Zephaniah, he's talking to the Jews, but in Jeremiah chapter 48, he's talking to the Gentiles. The entire world is amenable to God. See? The entire world is amenable to God. Settling on the leaves. Don't have time. But I want you to see here before I go on in 2 Kings 25. But let's go. I'm not ready to leave Jeremiah chapter 40 yet. I want you to see their attitude. So, God says what he says to Zephaniah in the book of Zephaniah, but there's an elaboration in Jeremiah 48 concerning the Moabites. And you see their attitude. For because of your trust in your own achievements and treasures, even you yourself will be captured. You're not going to escape. See? And look at verse 8. And a destroyer will come to every city so that no city will escape. The valley also will be ruined and the plateau will be destroyed. As the Lord said, give wings to Moab, for she will flee away, and her cities will become desolation without habitation in them. God is going to do this because he's a jealous God. But they have the attitude. See, the Moabites had the attitude of those in Jerusalem. God is not going to do anything. He's not going to do a thing. They were indifferent. He's not going to do anything. And God knows what people think. He knows how they feel. He knows what they said. And so it's like he's not going to do anything. And the Moabites were doing very well as a nation, undisturbed. See, when he said they haven't gone into exile, the Jews have gone into exile, but not the Moabites. See, the Jews were disturbed. Now watch what God says here. Watch how he deals with this. Watch this in verse 11 again. Moab has been at ease since his youth, undisturbed. Great nation, undisturbed. See? He has been undisturbed on his leaves. Neither has he been emptied from vessel to vessel. See, that's that racking. See the racking. That's the wine from vessel to vessel. From barrel to barrel. That's how you get rid of the leaves. Nor has he gone into exile. Therefore, he retains his flavor, see, and his aroma has not changed. See, his aroma has not changed. So in his mind, he's a great nation and everything is going so well and he has a great taste because he's been allowed to remain in the barrel, to stay there, and it makes the wine get better and stronger. It tastes better. Undisturbed. So they have been undisturbed. Notice what God says. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord. I will send to him those who tip vessels. That's the Babylonians. And they will tip him over. See, that's that likened to wine. See, they were like the leaves, just leave it alone. Don't disturb it and let it sit and let's get the best taste. So don't disturb us. Leave us alone because we are doing so well and we know how to. It's like, leave me alone. I'm doing well, but I know how to do better. Just leave me alone. Don't disturb me. See, like the wine, settle on the leaves. Let the leaves settle in there. Let this remain settle in there. It's going to make leave it alone. Don't disturb it. It's going to not just better, it's going to make it greater. Leave it alone. Don't disturb it. So it's like the Moabites, leave us alone. We're doing great. We're going to do better. Just leave it alone. But God's going to make it happen. He says, therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I shall send to him those who tip vessels. That's the Babylonians. Because remember in the book of Zephaniah, God is going to send the Babylonians to the Jerusalem to punish them for the continuation of sin. And so when this time comes, the Moabites are going to get it also. So the Babylonians, see, he's utilizing them in his symbolism. It's like this idiom. And so the Babylonians are going to be one to tip them over. But notice what God is, he's not, watch this. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I shall send him to those who tip vessels, and they will tip him over, and they will, listen to this, and they will empty his vessels and shatter his jars. In other words, I'm not just going to tip it over, I'm going to take things away from you. Shatter his jars, the wine glasses. I'm just going to take them away. See, what is God doing here? But look at verse 16. The disaster of Moab will come soon, and its calamity has swiftly hastened. See that? I mean, verse 21, judgment has also come upon the plain, and you see, judgment has come. In verse 38, on all the housetops of Moab and in its streets, there is lamentation everywhere. I have broken Moab like an undesirable vessel, declares the Lord. How shattered, see how shattered it is, how they have wailed. See, they're crying. How Moab has turned his back. He is ashamed. So Moab will become a laughingstock and an object of terror to all around him. Wow. Verse 43, terror and pit and snare are coming upon you, O inhabitants of Moab, declares the Lord. The one who flees from terror will fall. Listen to this, no escape. Listen to this, no escape. No escape. No escape. The one who flees from terror will fall into the pit. The one who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare. I shall bring upon her, even upon Moab, the year of their punishment, declares the Lord. Let's go back to Zephaniah quickly. But I want you to see here that what happens in Zephaniah chapter 1, see, verse 12 again. And I will come about at that time, I will search Jerusalem with lamps and will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit, who say in their heart, the Lord will not do good or evil. But watch this. Moreover, their wealth will become plunder. See? Their wealth will become plunder. And the house is desolate. Yes, they will build houses, but not inhabit them, and plant vineyards, but will not drink their wine. God is going to take everything away from them. See? You're putting those things before God. There's something that makes people unconcerned. There's something that makes people indifferent. And God knows exactly what that thing is. There is something that makes people not want to worship God. There is something that makes people have itching ears. There's something that makes people, sometimes they just want to relax too much. But there's something, we're on different levels, that makes us not really be concerned about godly things. Some people will put money everywhere else and give God just a little bit. They can invest in everything else, but give God just a little bit. They can invest in time and everything else, but just give God just a little bit. There's something that causes us to do that, and God knows exactly what that thing is. And see, he's not going to allow that. And so what he does, he's going to take action to wake you up, or rather to wake us up. Now watch this. Let's go to Revelation real quick. Revelation chapter 3. See, he's talking here to the church, the Laodiceans. Watch this. Revelation chapter 3. Watch this. He's talking to the church, the Laodiceans. But I want you to see it's something that causes us to be indifferent, not care about godly things. And notice the church in Laodicea, they were indifferent towards godly things, but they were not indifferent towards their things. Now watch. Before we do this, I'm going to read something about Laodicea. They were considered the wealthiest city during the Roman times, famous for their glossy black woolen garments, eye powder, and they had a bank industry, bank establishments, medical schools, and a textile industry. But it's very interesting. After the earthquake in AD 60, they declined the help of Rome because they had their own money. And then in Laodicea, that they had this eye ointment that they made much money off of, and so that was type of a medicine for eye problems. So they had it. They had much. They had plenty, and so there was the Laodicea was wealthy and had much, and had this. And remember this medical industry, the medical, and then it was they developed this eye ointment, and so they had money. They were wealthy. That caused them to be indifferent. See, that caused their indifference. Notice what Jesus says in chapter 3, and verse, let's go to verse 14. An angel of the Lord, listen to this, an angel of the Lord in Laodicea, right? Amen, the faithful and witness, the beginning of the creation of God, says this. I know your deeds, that you are neither, notice this, they're neither cold nor hot. I would that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm, you ever drink lukewarm water? It's like, give me something hot or something. You don't want to drink it. Neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. They made the Lord sick. I don't want lukewarm either. I don't like cold coffee. I like hot coffee in the morning or something cold later on. I don't need anything lukewarm. I don't want it. I don't want it. But that's their attitude. They were indifferent towards godly things. But notice what he said. But notice why this attitude. Why do they have this attitude? Because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy. I have need of nothing. And you do not know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. They didn't know that. They thought they were doing so well because of everything they saw and their achievements, and just like Moab, their achievements and their accomplishments, and those during the time of Judah during our time, they saw their accomplishments and their achievements, and so they settled on the least. Leave us alone. But notice how that develops an attitude. But notice this, again, I want to repeat myself. You're not indifferent towards your things. You're indifferent towards godly things. And God sees that. And so he's going to tell them, this is what you need to do, the church in Laodicea. But I like this because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have not need, see that? And have need of nothing. You don't need anything. And you do not know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. They didn't know. That's how we are. We're deceived. We don't know that we're blind and naked and wretched because we have a vision. We see the things that we've accomplished and we think it's like, I'm all that. Let's close with something here. Turn to 2 Timothy. Second Timothy. Give you a few things that help us. 2 Timothy chapter 4. This is how I know that when we know that there's a lot of indifference going on concerning godly things, this is how people react. Notice what he says to Timothy. Chapter 4 and verse 3. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. See? They don't want that. It's indifferent towards sound doctrine. I can care less about sound doctrine. But wanting to have their ears tickled. See, tickled. I can preach something and teach something, and if you like it, especially people love stuff on motivation and things like that. They don't like to hear doctrinal stuff because they don't want to hear it. And so it doesn't tickle their ears. It's like hurts them. They don't want to hear it. But certain things, or they want to, it's like, oh, I love it. Say it, speak it. They will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires. See, that's what indifference does. When you're so concerned about other things and not God, you're looking for something that can satisfy your desires, that fits your schedule, fits your lifestyle, and will turn away their ears from the truth and will turn aside to myths. Here's how I know that I am not indifferent. A few things. Acts 17. We're going to close with Thessalonians, and that's it. Acts 17. Watch this. This is an attitude of concern, an attitude of wanting to please God. You're not indifferent. Now, these were more noble, verse 11, than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with great eagerness, see, examining the scriptures daily to see whether these things were so. Many of them, therefore, believed, along with a number of the prominent Greek women and men. See, what indifference there was. That's how I know that I'm not indifferent. When I search the scriptures daily, I want to know what God requires, not what man requires. And once I find out what God requires, I do those things. Watch Thessalonians. I love the Thessalonians. Watch them. Watch them. Look at verse 1. 1 Thessalonians. This is a sign of not being indifferent. He said in verse 2 of 1 Thessalonians, we give thanks to God always for you all, making mention of you in our prayers, constantly bearing in mind your work of faith. See, they're not indifferent. Labor of love, that's not indifference in godly things. They were concerned about godly things. Steadfastness of hope. And in our Lord Jesus Christ, in the presence of our God and Father. Look at verse 6. You became imitators of us and of the Lord, having received the word in much tribulation with joy of the Holy Spirit. Verse 8, the word of the Lord has sounded forth from you, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place. Your faith toward God has gone forth, so that we have no need to say anything. Wow. Look at 2 Thessalonians, probably written 2 or 3 months later. They are still doing it. First chapter 1, notice this. Verse 3, we ought always give thanks to God for you, brethren, as an only fitting, because your faith is greatly enlarged. See, they're not indifferent. And the love of each one of you toward one another grows ever greater. But don't think they had everything easy, because if you look at chapter 1, notice in verse 9, for they themselves report about us what kind of reception we had with you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God, and wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, that is Jesus, who delivers us from, from the wrath of God. Why do you think God is doing what he does here? See, delivered us from the wrath of God. And so God recognizes that people are indifferent. And their actions show they're putting other things before him. So they're disregarding what he represents and who he is and what everything he put together, his whole plan to save mankind. So it takes action to wake people up, to cause them to repent. That's the love of God. He just said, so he just mentions the wrath of God in the book of Thessalonians. So I can deal with this wrath, which will help me wake up, and Most likely will remove some things that I need to be removed to help me focus on him. And because I do that, think about this, in a good situation, it was my will, but I go through this difficulty and I experience what God has put before me providentially, and I change my ways and I begin to obey him according to his will, and I escape the wrath of God. So that's the love of God right there. What if he doesn't do anything? He allows me to be indifferent. It's not love. Would you allow your children to be unconcerned about you, about things, about spiritual things? There's a time when you have to step in and make things right so they don't lose their soul. And that's what he's doing. The love of God means a lot to us. He desires all to be saved. If we can help you, please come out and stand and sing a song of invitation.